Now, welcome to the beginning of another one of my what if stories, where this time we're going to tackle the question of what if, or maybe how, we can sort of change or undo the sequel trilogy, but do it within the story itself. But not by outright retconning it, but instead by keeping the sequels as part of the story, as part of the canon, as well as using most of its characters for a kind of retelling. Now, how am I going to do that? Well, you'll of course have to watch or listen to find out. But the name of the story, The Rise of Finn, is of course a bit of a clue. And this is almost certainly going to be my most ambitious what-if story so far. And I'm going to try to keep this as focused as possible, I guess you could say, so that this doesn't end up lasting 30 parts or something crazy. Though maybe people would really enjoy a long ongoing story, I don't know. Either way, for those of you who are maybe new to my stories, just know that this is mostly an audio experience or something akin to an audiobook. Yes, there are going to be images in here that will go along with the story, but they're mainly in there so you can just kind of follow along a bit better. They're really just general images that somewhat set a scene or show who's talking at any particular moment. And I tend not to do too much with them or too much with the editing because there would simply be no way I could get an episode per week done otherwise. Also, there will be, or should be, a new episode up every Tuesday, though sometimes stuff happens and I get them up a day late, or it's even possible I may miss a week entirely here and there, but that rarely ever happens. Anyway, without further ado, let's start this story. We begin on Tatooine, at the end of the sequel trilogy as we know it, where we watch as Rey buries the lightsabers of Luke and Leia in the sand, before we then see a curious old woman and her Eopie come out of the desert, and comment about how it's been so long since anyone's been here, and afterwards she asks for a name, to which Rey, while the Force ghosts of Luke and Leia look on, simply says that her name is, of course, Rey. When the old woman then asks, "Rey who?" she responds with a proud smile, "Rey Skywalker." The woman then only shrugs as if that name means little or nothing to her, before she turns to head back the way she came. That's when Rey calls out to her, "Tell everyone that name." The old woman pauses and looks confused before glancing all around her and then saying, "Who exactly am I going to tell?" Completely unperturbed, the smile on Rey's face only grows as she says, "It doesn't matter. Soon the whole galaxy will know that name." The old woman again sort of gives a careless shrug, but this time with a slight roll of the eyes, before she then turns and heads back into the desert with her Eopie. Rey then turns towards the shimmering Force ghosts of Luke and Leia and starts walking towards them, still smiling. And with each step she takes, we notice the proud looks and smiles on their faces begins to fade. Soon enough then, she stands right in front of them, and we see some sort of realization dawn upon the ghostly pale blue face of Luke Skywalker. He's then about to say something, when Rey simply raises her hand and touches him, and then touches Leia, and whatever words he was about to say are lost as both Force ghosts vaporize into a mystical-looking smoke that is quickly blown away and dissipated by the hot desert winds. And after that, everything fades to black, and we can faintly hear something that almost sounds like cackling laughter. Shortly thereafter, we watch as absolute black becomes a starfield, and we then watch as the Millennium Falcon rips its way out of hyperspace and starts to descend towards a city planet below, a world we recognize to be Coruscant. We then follow the Falcon as it enters the atmosphere, dodges all the airborne traffic there, and makes its way to a landing pad not all too far from the old mushroom-shaped Senate building. And standing on that landing platform, looking maybe 5 years older than the last time we saw him, which would be at the end of The Rise of Skywalker, is Poe Dameron, with a data pad tucked under his arm, and wearing a royal blue uniform we can only guess is New Republic. After watching it land, the ramp of the Falcon lowers, and immediately rambling down it is Chewbacca, who quickly makes his way over to Poe, wraps his giant arms around him, and easily lifts him up off his feet, as he roars something that sounds like a "good to see you" in Wookiee, to which Poe manages to say how it's great to see him too, but if he could put him down so he could breathe again, that'd also be great. Chewbacca then does just that, as next down the ramp walks Finn, who also goes right up to Poe, and the two momentarily embrace before stepping back from each other. Poe then gives him a nod of the head along with a feigned, very serious expression as he says, "General, good to see you again." Finn returns the nod and says, "Good to see you too, General." But to that Poe gives his best modest shrug and says, "Actually, it's Grand Admiral of the Republic now." He then looks past Finn and towards the ramp of the Falcon and asks, "No Lando?" Finn shakes his head and says, helping former stormtroopers find something like a normal life has kept us both a bit busy. He just needed a break from everything. Poe nods in understanding, and Finn then asks, you said you had some good news for me this time. Poe quickly responds, some good news, not as much as I'd like, I'm afraid, but it's a start at least. Poe hands the datapad he was holding over to Finn, who begins to look it over. Poe then continues, I have a world and a general time frame, but not much else. Finn makes a bit of a frown and says, how am I ever supposed to find my parents with just this? And what about every other former stormtrooper? What am I supposed to tell them? Because they're all like me, Poe. They all want to know who they are. They all want to know where they came from before they can finally really move forward with their lives. Poe's face drops a bit as he responds, sorry, pal, I've pored over almost every First Order database the New Republic has gotten its hands on. I've even gone over old mission reports, which is where I got this much from. I'm afraid they didn't keep very good records about where they got their recruits from. Finn stares at the information on the datapad a bit longer and then says, you said almost every. Is there stuff you haven't seen yet? Poe responds, well, there are some that Rey has deemed classified that even I can't get my hands on. Finn looks a little surprised or taken aback and then says, she can do that? Poe gives him a look as if to say, you really have been gone a while, haven't you? And then responds, in case you forgot, most of the government was lost with Hosnian Prime. Putting it all back together has been an absolute nightmare. One Rey has been helping out with as much as she can. She's almost single-handedly been keeping the peace, all the while still finding and training the next generation of Jedi. Finn looks amazed by that and says, how does she find the time for all that? Poe shrugs and says with nothing but a serious expression on his face, I'm not really sure she even sleeps anymore. Finn doesn't seem to know what to say, so instead he just continues to stare at what it says on the datapad about the planet he's from. Poe then hesitantly asks, you're still mad at her, aren't you? Finn shakes his head. Nah, I was never mad at her. I just thought after she found out I could use the Force that she'd, I don't know, help train me to use it. Instead she turned me down and gave me the Falcon, or more like she gave the Falcon back to Lando after he convinced her that Han didn't win it so fair and square after all. At that point, Chewbacca, who still stands nearby, lets out a bit of a growl, and Finn turns to him and says, hey, I'm just saying what Lando said about it. I'm not saying I agree with him, buddy. Finn then turns back to Poe and says, so Rey is, what, keeping information about the First Order to herself? Poe shakes his head. No, nothing like that. Well, not exactly, anyway. Finn gives a look as if to ask what not exactly means. Poe then continues, she said it's just Sith stuff mostly. Information she doesn't want to ever get out there again about, well, whatever it is Palpatine did to come back. You know, all that dark science and Sith sorcery stuff. Forbidden knowledge that should die with him, she said. To all that, Finn looks a little skeptical, and so Poe says, I'm sure if she had any information that would help you find where you came from, she'd have long ago given it to you. Finn almost reluctantly then says, yeah, you're probably right. Still, I'm getting this feeling. Poe responds, a feeling? Like a feeling? A Force feeling? Finn gives him a bit of a look and then says, I don't know, it's just a feeling. Maybe I should go and talk to her, it's been a while. It'd be nice to put it all behind us. Poe chuckles a bit. Good luck with that, getting to see her, I mean. Did I not just mention how busy she is these days? Finn then says, well, yeah, but it's me. The Rey I know would still be bugged by the way we said goodbye last time. Poe gives him a look as if to say, maybe she's not exactly the Rey you used to know anymore. But then Poe says instead, after a long moment of silence between them, tell you what, I'll head over there with you. Tell her it's urgent or something. She's bound to let us in then. We then cut to Finn and Poe walking through the halls of what we recognize to be the old Jedi Temple on Coruscant, which became the Imperial Palace under Palpatine. We even hear Poe comment about how it's almost become a combination of the two now, how this is where Rey is training the next generation of Jedi, but also how it's become a sort of central hub for the New Republic under her guidance. We then hear Finn ask, as he and we seem to notice there are a lot of Jedi trainees of all ages and species walking around, large groups of them in fact. He asks just how many new students has Rey taken on. Poe responds with a shrug. I don't know, hundreds at this point, I think? Finn seems stunned to hear that and asks back, where did she find them all, and where did she find the time to find them all, much less train them? Poe again says, again looking all too serious, I told you, I don't think she sleeps anymore. That's when one of the students, a member of the reptilian-looking Falleen species, maybe in his late teen years, who was standing nearby and perhaps even shadowing them the whole time, quickly comes forward and speaks up and says, "She's able to find so many students because there was an awakening not long ago. The Force gifted many with its power in order to counter the threat of Palpatine's return." He seems to almost glare at Finn for a brief moment before finishing, "Some of which, a very, very few, were granted more strength with it than others." Finn shakes his head a bit and says, "That's not how the Force works, is it?" He glances at Poe, who only shrugs in a way that says he's the wrong person to ask about all this. The Falleen student then gives a slight, almost mocking grin as he bows and says, "Enjoy your stay, untrained one. The Master already knows you're here and is eager to see you again." After that, the Falleen student walks away, and Finn says to Poe, "That was weird, right?" Poe quickly nods in agreement and says, "Yeah, a little weird. I don't think he liked you very much for some reason." Finn then takes a moment and looks all around him, again at all the students quietly walking the halls, but instead of saying anything, he just gives a little shake of the head and starts to follow Poe again. Soon enough, the two are walking out onto a balcony somewhere high up in the temple, where they see Rey, all smiles, meeting with a small group of dignitaries of some alien species we've never seen before, who also seem to be smiling and quite pleased with whatever they're hearing from Rey. After waiting a few minutes, the dignitaries leave and Rey approaches Finn and Poe, still smiling, though it seems to be a little tight or forced now. Looking at Finn, she then says, "Well, this is an unexpected surprise." Finn just replies, "Yeah, it's so good to see you too." Rey gives him something like a little frown and replies, "I didn't say it was an unwelcome surprise." Finn all but ignores that and says, "What exactly is going on here?" Rey, looking as if she's confused by the question, replies as she looks off in the direction the dignitaries just went, "It's a simple meeting with the people of Delos Prime. After all, I learned much from Leia, not just the ways of the Force, but the ways of politics as well." "No," Finn says, shaking his head and taking a moment to glance all around him. "What's going on with all of this?" Rey replies, "I'm trying to make things right, to put them back the way they're meant to be. I call it the Skywalker Initiative." Finn thinks a moment, or perhaps concentrates on something he's feeling, and says, "But this doesn't seem like you. Something feels way off here." Rey then gives a look to Poe, as if telling him with just a glance that she'd like to speak to Finn alone. And so Poe takes a few steps back while Rey walks over to the railing of the balcony, followed closely by Finn. She then says, "You've been trying to learn how to use the Force, haven't you? Trying to figure it out all on your own." Finn snaps back, "Well, you didn't seem so bad at that. Plus you wouldn't train me, and I can't shake this feeling like I'm supposed to be using it. I'm supposed to be doing something, but I just can't figure out what. Helping all the stormtroopers has been great, but it's not what I'm meant to do." Rey gives him a sympathetic look. "I didn't want to train you because your attachments are too strong to your fellow troopers, too strong when it comes to looking for your family, too strong when it comes to me. In another time, you would have been trained. No doubt the Jedi of old would have found you and made you one of their own." That answer seems to somewhat satisfy Finn, but we can tell something about the way she has said it has bothered him. Still, he goes on to say, "And what about those fellow stormtroopers of mine? I heard from Poe there are databases you haven't even allowed him to dig into?" Rey quickly responds, "Because there's nothing in them that would help you or anyone else. Trust me, Finn. They're just old secrets of Palpatine's that should die with him." Rey smiles kindly and then says, "Now, is there anything else? If there's not, I have so much to do. I really wish we could catch up more. I wish you would have given me some warning you were coming." And before waiting for Finn to even respond, Rey's attention is captured by one of her students, and she briskly walks away, leaving him standing there looking a little dumbfounded over the whole experience, which is when Poe returns to his side and puts a hand on Finn's shoulder and says, "It's so amazing what she's accomplished, isn't it?" Finn rather subtly or nonchalantly then turns his head and looks at Poe's face, and sees a completely enamored look there, almost as if he's been enchanted by her. It looks like Finn's then about to say something, but says instead, as he watches Rey walk ever further away, "Yeah, it's incredible what she's done. Incredible what she's doing for the galaxy." The next thing we know, we're watching the Millennium Falcon skim across the sandy surface of the planet Tatooine. We're then taken into the cockpit and see Finn seated there, looking even a few years older than we just saw him moments ago. We also see that on his face is a combination of utter exhaustion and despair, the latter of which only grows when he looks to his right at the co-pilot spot and looks upon an empty seat. or one that's empty other than a blue cape and a Wookiee bandolier that hangs from it. Finn then shuts his eyes tight for a moment as if overcome by pain or grief and mutters something that sounds like an apology. He then opens his eyes again and focuses on what he sees coming up fast on the horizon, which we recognize to be the old Lars homestead. Next, we're watching as Finn is walking the grounds of that homestead, his eyes focused on the sand beneath his feet as if desperately looking for something, or like he feels something should be there. And we hear him muttering to himself over and over again, "Come on, she said it'd be here." Finally, at one point during his search, a faint flicker of hope touches his face, and he stops and drops to his knees and starts frantically digging with his hands. After some time, he pulls from the dirt something or some things wrapped in cloth. Quickly, he removes that cloth and tosses it aside, revealing two lightsabers within, one being Leia's and the other being one that once belonged to Luke Skywalker, as well as his father before him. It's also one he had briefly wielded before as well. Finn then hangs Leia's saber from his belt before then activating the old Skywalker saber, the blue blade blazing and humming to life. Which is when he hears a voice and then looks up to see Poe, along with a dark-robed and hooded figure, emerge from one of the nearby buildings. And under that hood, we can just make out the reptilian face of a Falleen. "You couldn't just leave it all alone, could you, buddy?" we hear Poe say. "And how many have you gotten killed along the way, huh? How many of our friends are dead because of you?" Finn then shouts back, "Because of me? Stop fooling yourself. Break free of whatever she's done to you, Poe. See the truth. That their blood is on her hands, and a lot more blood will be on her hands before this is all said and done." Poe shakes his head and responds, "She hasn't done anything to me or anyone else, and all she has done is finally bring peace to everyone. The galaxy is a better place with her leading it, and her Jedi protecting it." Finn quickly fires back again, "Her Jedi? I might not be one, probably never will be. I might not even know the first thing about how the Force really works. But she and they," he focuses in on the robed figure when he says this, "they are not Jedi, and I will not just stand by and let her, or should I say him, rule the galaxy again." Poe then lets out a bit of a sigh and turns his head to the robed figure next to him and motions with his head towards Finn, as if telling him to go ahead and take care of this. Immediately then the figure removes his robes, ignites a green lightsaber, and charges at Finn, letting out a sort of battle cry as he does. And it is indeed the same Falleen Finn encountered at the temple some years ago now, though with more age and years of training behind him. Finn quickly raises the old Skywalker saber and blocks the first few serpent-like strikes from the Falleen, and he does it with perhaps a bit more skill with a saber than the last time we saw him wielding one. He even smiles a bit at the slightly confused, and maybe even a little impressed, look on the Falleen's face and says, "Been doing a bit of practicing." But the Falleen smiles in return and says, "Practice without proper instruction is of little consequence. You are still the untrained one." Finn gives him a rather bemused look as if asking, "Why do you keep calling me that?" And then he goes on the offensive, sort of anyway. It quickly becomes clear that yes, Finn has done practicing of some kind, but he is still no match for the well-trained Falleen, the prized student of the one who calls herself Rey Skywalker. Quickly the tables are turned, and Finn finds himself holding on for dear life and about ready to fall, when there is suddenly a blinding flash of light. Both combatants, as well as Poe who stands nearby, forget everything else and shield their eyes as they look upon what can only be described as a shimmering white portal hovering just above the desert floor, only a few paces away from them. And from that portal emerges an old, bearded human male, perhaps in his 70s or even 80s, but still looking more than able, and he holds a green, ignited lightsaber in one hand. The Falleen then looks upon the old man and calls out in a loud voice, "You were right, Master. He's come for him, as you said would happen." We then hear the voice of Rey say, "As I had foreseen," as she emerges from her hiding spot in the same building Poe and the Falleen had come from, and she's dressed in dark robes and with her ignited golden lightsaber in hand. With her eyes on the old man, she then says, "I have waited a long time for this, Ezra Bridger." Old Ezra then, looking at Rey without a trace of fear upon his face, says, "We meet again, but unfortunately for you, this encounter will only leave you as disappointed as the last one." But to that, Rey smiles and gives a simple nod of the head towards the Falleen, who instantly springs into action, and it looks like he's going to attack Ezra, who readies himself for that attack. But it never comes. Instead, at the last second, the Falleen dives past him and through the portal, much to the surprise and dismay of Ezra, who turns to Finn and says, Come, we have to get out of here now. Finn hesitates, and in that moment Rey leaps forward with uncanny speed and seems to be headed for the portal. But this time Ezra is ready and blocks her, and immediately the two are locked in saber combat. But after only a few moments, it's clear old Ezra is no match for Rey, and it's likely only a matter of moments before she'll land a blow that ends him, and then she'll be able to go through the portal herself. Ezra then yells at Finn, "You have to go, you have to trust me. It's the only way to fix everything. Remember what she told you." Finn then hesitates only briefly, looking back at Poe, who suddenly draws his blaster and aims it at him, but quickly Finn runs and dives through the portal just as the blaster goes off. And we watch as it immediately closes up behind him then, all the while Rey and Ezra continue to battle. And that is where this part ends. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. If you've made it this far, hopefully that means you've enjoyed it and will be interested to again know new parts go up every Tuesday, or they usually do. Sometimes they are a day late. Either way, let me know what you thought about it, what you thought about the start in the comments below, or what you think will happen next. Either way, again, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.